Hi, my name is Meredith Haney, and today we're going to be talking about the Bowenian family therapy model. And this is a very interesting model because it can be used, it is with the family systems, but it can be used with couples, families, or individuals. It's a well-rounded therapy and it's easy to explain, so it's easy for a clinician to use. And we'll see some of the pieces that go into it in just a moment. The overview, it was developed by Murray Bowen. And he actually did a lot of work with schizophrenia patients, and it became very evident to him that their role with their mother was very important, which kind of was the framework for this model, because he realized that the identified client that we see in therapy is actually just kind of a symptom of the family system. And so he developed these pieces that go into his therapy model that actually will create how you go about treating and kind of getting people to identify problems on their own. So like I mentioned before, people with schizophrenia have a very intense relationship with their mothers, what he was finding out. The patient served as the emotional, or the family served as the emotional unit for the patient. So anything the patient was feeling was kind of based on the family relationships. And therapy, as far as the clinician was concerned, that they needed to be very neutral, emotionally objective, and detached from whatever was happening in the family. There are 8 concepts of the Bowenian model. The first one is differentiation of self. So how far we can distance ourselves from the impact of our choices based on the opinions of others. And we'll explain that in a second. Triangles. Kind of the 3-person unit that are more stable than the emotional dyads with only 2 people. The nuclear family emotional system, so the development of social processes and emotional processes within the family system. The family projection process, kind of how the family continues to aid in the development of issues within the family. The multi-generational transmission process, again, this is where we see the grandparent patterns end up with the parents to the children, and the children to their children. Emotional cutoff, how people will distance themselves in times of anxiety or tension within the family, and how they solve this problem by becoming emotionally cut off and what that means for them in the long run. Sibling position, again, kind of the roles that people will take on, whether it be firstborn, middle child, or youngest, and again what that means and how it's impacted by the other areas. And then the last piece is the societal emotional process. Again, this is how all of these other pieces are replicated in our society and create those same issues between the family and societal concerns. So the first one is differentiation of self. This is how as individuals we get our needs met, and how we respond to times of anxiety and stress. In this, are we responding based on what our mother may think, or what our father may think, or what our sibling may think, versus what do we need? What are we trying to do? And if we respond based on what we need and what we want, based on that particular tension or anxiety, then we have a very high differentiation of self. But if we're responding based on what someone else would perceive as our choice, then that's a very low differentiation of self. Also, people with low differentiation of self may want someone else to choose based off of their needs. So if 2 people are kind of going through this process at the same time, they may ask someone else to say, if you choose choice B, then that's going to make me happy. And them putting their wants and needs on someone else means that they have a very low differentiation of self as well. Triangles. Triangles are kind of the strongest, most secure emotional bonds, because there's 3 people. It's much stronger than the dyad created between 2 people. But what happens is that when tension occurs in these emotional triangles, we see kind of this insider-outsider development happening. And typically there are 2 insiders and 1 outsider. And what happens is that during times of stress, it's typically between the 2 insiders, because they're more emotionally attached anyways compared to the outsider. And so what we need to realize is that during those stressful times, that insider will try to actually push the outsider to take their position, and they become the new outsider, so they're out of the tension and anxiety in the triangle. But what happens is that the triangle tries to stay cohesive, but when it gets too stressed, then one of the members of that triangle will kind of form a bond with another triangle, and we see this interlocking triangle pattern happen, which can is only present when high tension and high anxiety happens, because it basically needs somewhere else to go. The nuclear family emotional system is how patterns are developed in a family, both how they develop problems and how they handle problems. So there are 4 main areas. One is marital conflict. So as soon as something happens, it becomes a husband-wife or partner-partner situation. The second one is dysfunction in one spouse, where one spouse may continuously kind of spew their issues onto the other spouse. So you have the problem, it's all your fault, you need to fix this. And then that spouse takes on a lot of the anxiety and the stress and the tension of the relationship, causing the other spouse to kind of coast along and not have to feel it as much. But again, it's still dysfunctional. And the next one is impairment of children. This is where the husband and spouse may feel the tension, but instead of them dealing with it, they will actually put it on the child. This can cause the child to then think something is wrong with me, and it can then result in the parents acting as if there was actually something wrong with the child. And this is where we see a lot of the children that end up getting blamed for, well, they're the problem. And it's mainly because the parents don't want to deal with their own stress. And the last one is emotional distance. This is where if someone were to get tied up in the anxiety of the family, instead of trying to deal with it or having to go through one of these top 3 where there's some dysfunction in the individual, they just simply cut themselves off. And we'll find out later why this doesn't really work in the long run. And so again, the identified client typically results from one of these areas of concern. The family projection process. Again, we're looking at the anxiety, the issues in the family system. So the parental anxiety actually transfers to the children. In this, there's something wrong with the child, which then moves on to the parents interpreting the child's behavior as something is wrong with them, and it kind of confirms the fear that there was something wrong with the child even though there wasn't. And then the parental actions are in response to them perceiving that there's actually something wrong with their child. And so what happens is there was nothing originally wrong with the child. This fear didn't need to be confirmed, and these actions are now off base compared to the child's actual actions. And so it will take time in therapy to undo this thought pattern. This thought pattern, because the kids take on this parental fear, it can actually make the children dependent upon the parents, which makes them have very maladaptive coping skills, which bleeds into the multi-generational processes that we'll discuss in a second. And then it can be fixed by parents managing their own anxiety and their own tension in their own lives or in the couple relationship that's happening, so that they don't have to put this onto the children. So the multi-generational transmission process, like we talked on the last slide about parents putting it onto their kids, it then changes how the kid is able to develop and have normal emotional processes. And so we need to fix this as well. So it includes the level of differentiation. If you have low differentiated grandparents, then your parents will be even lower differentiated, and then you will be even lower differentiated. And so the only way to fix that is kind of to break that cycle. Seek therapy, seek help to increase your level of differentiation. Families also replicate problems throughout the generation. So we see a lot of substance abuse maintain a multi-generational process. We see a lot of mental illness, anxiety, depression, even schizophrenia have a multi-generational process to it. This next one's emotional cutoff. So what we see is that when tension rises too high and people are trying to get out of it, they will emotionally cut themselves off. So they'll distance themselves from the anxiety and the tension. And so the goal is to reduce the anxiety and tension. But what happens is that by denying the importance of family relationships they are no longer able to feel that normal, connected relationship pattern that we all seek as humans. And so what happens is that we have unresolved concerns, increased tension and anxiety, and we're actually unable to fulfill future relationships. And so if you're emotionally cut off from your mother, in theory, then if you have a child, then it could cause issues in that child. Either you're overly attached or you distance yourself from your child as well because you saw issues with your parents. So it adds stress to future relationships, even though you thought you were getting out of the tension and anxiety. So this process doesn't work, and the goal for Bowenian therapists and therapists that go by this model is to figure out how we can fix this from happening or repair any relationships or any subsequent trauma that's happened because of emotional cutoff. Sibling position is very important. We see a lot of firstborns becoming those natural leaders. We see a lot of the middle children kind of going off and developing their own relationships away from their family units. And we see a lot of the younger children becoming the wild child. But what we need to understand is that even though that these processes are normal and that we see these kind of in all families, anybody can kind of supersede their birth order if they're affected by the family protection process. And so if there's a lot of substance use in the family, or if there's a lot of tension in the marriage of the parents, then it's what we can see as these firstborns become the object of that tension and anxiety, and then they are no longer able to become those natural born leaders because they're taking on the anxiety and tension of the marriage, which can cause them to kind of develop maladaptive coping skills like substance use, or develop a mental illness themselves, whether it even be anxiety or depression, all the way through bipolar or other concerns. The societal emotional process. So this is the idea that whatever we see in the family unit can happen in society. And it happens the same way. Just like we see issues and tension and anxiety in the family system, we see war and regression and overpopulation and lack of available resources. And so the issues and how we deal with our family concerns are the same way we have to deal with the societal processes. And this is important because Bowen realized that how people respond to their family systems is the same way they respond to their societal systems. And it's important to kind of fix as much as possible, even though you can't always avoid the societal concerns. So according to goodtherapy.org, the uses of the Bowenian model includes schizophrenia, substance abuse, bipolar, anxiety, personality issues, depression, and eating disorders. The reason that all these are important to note for the Bowenian model is because he understood that schizophrenia came from that really intense mother-child relationship. Substance abuse, personality issues, depression, and eating disorders can all come, again, from that multi-generational process. How are we handling things? How are we able to cope with things? What is our level of differentiation? These all blend into the root causes of the rest of these. Same thing with bipolar, being able to handle your emotions, the highs and the lows. How are we dealing with those? Probably comes from our family unit. And so figuring out what the root of those are based on the previous slides and information will depend on how we can handle those and how we treat them the best. Limitations. So there's very limited evidence for the Bowenian model. So there's lack of just the research behind it. But there has been enough that it is evidence-based, but there needs to be more research on it. Neutrality on behalf of the clinician may be perceived as support for any maladaptive habits. So if we're not denying our client kind of the right to use substances or the right to go out and have reckless behaviors or be depressed, kind of almost approves it. And so the goal for Bowenian clinicians that want to use this model, it needs to be very forthcoming that yes, you need to remain neutral, but you also, the goal would be to present these behaviors that are maladaptive as just maladaptive, not necessarily good or bad, but just what are some of the cons of substance use. And so it remains neutral, but it also gets the point across that there needs to be some change. So in conclusion, clinicians must be able to apply these same concepts to their own life, figuring out what triangles we're in, what level of differentiation do we have. All of these things are important for us to be able to know where we stand, because we can't interact with our clients on the same level with the same. We wouldn't want someone with low differentiation to interact with us if we're low differentiated, because we need to understand that we are going to react and think certain ways. And so it's important to be effective if we know where we stand, so we can be neutral in the therapy room. So it can be used with couples, families, or individuals. There's no limit to this model. And then basic concepts can be used with different clients, with different concerns, and from different backgrounds. So it's able to be used with all of your clients, and it's easy to understand, and it's very to the point. And so explaining where clients fit while they need to come to their own realization, as we all know, it is easy to kind of put it into the framework. All right. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed learning a little bit more about the Bowenian family systems model.